It's the BBC Sherlock Holmes theme. Oh my goodness, this is a great day to be a board gamer. So 3 years ago, we reviewed a game called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. This game is nothing more and nothing less than 10 Sherlock Holmes mysteries for you to solve yourself. We called it the best game to play solo, the best game for couples, the best mystery game. And this month, we've got this. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, Jack the Ripper and West End Adventures. 10 new cases in a gorgeous new box that opens at the side, and it's great. And it doesn't even have the typos that riddled the original, which means if you have not yet treated yourself to one of these boxes, buy one, take it home, lock the door, call a loved one, and drop a deuce. Specifically, a deduce. And we're not going to be reviewing it, because it's only the second most exciting Sherlock Holmes game to come out this month. This is Watson and Holmes, and it's going to be the true test of your intelligence. Ignore all of the little bits. This is actually one of those games that's simple enough to delight family members while also absolutely impressing board game collectors. So just like Consulting Detective, Watson and Holmes starts with you sitting down with your friends, picking one of the cases to solve, and then someone's got to read the introduction aloud. Or you can use the QR code on the front to listen to an audio file. That's attention to detail, you see, packing the game with authentic Victorian-era technology. So you'll all hear this story of an unsolved crime, whether it's a death on a yacht or the disappearance of a scientist, and this is where the game becomes different from the cooperative game of Consulting Detective. This is in fact a competitive game, and one that's cagier than a cage match between Nicolas Cage and Luke Cage, because you're still visiting locations of your choice and reading little slivers of story, some clues, some red herrings, but you're doing it alone, racing around town, trying to piece together this mystery until eventually someone knocks on the door of 221B Baker Street. At that point, they write down their answers and check the back of this card, comparing their answers to Sherlock's answers. But to quote Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Hound of the Baskervilles, if you come at the Holmes, you better not miss. Because if any one of your answers to the questions are wrong, that player is simply eliminated. In other words, it's a cross between Consulting Detective and Cluedo, of all things. Now, let me explain the game of running around town in a bit more detail, because it's tons of fun. This is the setup for Case 4, The Adventure of the Closed-Eyed Corpse. Now, a socialite has been found dead in a chapel, which is up here, or the grounds, and he went to a dinner party last night, and this 3x4 grid is smoky London with societies and galleries and families. Now, you want to find out why this guy's dead, so the first place you might want to visit is the scene of the crime. Great, but a player can actually outbid you for that location. You see, everyone gets 10 of these carriage tokens, and by spending a carriage token, which loosely represents your stamina, your money as you run around town, you can get somewhere first. Now, players can actually outbid you for these locations. This kicks that investigator off the location and they have to pick somewhere else. Or they can actually go right back in and outbid you. And this is an auction game with teeth, because when you get outbid for a location, you get all your auction counters back but one. Because you raced to get there, but you still weren't quick enough. And you can also visit locations with some auction tokens, you know, right out of the gate, so no one outbids you. It's tense, it's interesting. You're trying to establish the value of cards which you fundamentally don't know. Anyway, once everyone's picked a location, then you are all going to pick that card up and look at it, and you get time to make notes or pretend to make notes, because maybe the location you visited is garbage and you don't want anyone to know. Speaking of players being awful, once you leave your location and you put it back, you have the option of tipping off the police and leaving a police token on that location, like, oh, I don't know, the scene of the crime. And police tokens mean no one else can go there until they get a call-off token, a whistle, because all police respond to whistles, they're like dogs or something, by visiting the locations like here, Scotland Yard or the Foreign Office, that also get you a whistle. So players are sealing off locations, they're outbidding each other, and it's all a bit farcical, and it is tense, but mostly farcical because no one knows the value of anything. Now, what I really love is that with lots of the other scenarios, the designer has played and experimented with lots of little twists on this running around town game. In fact, in this one, case 4, it actually costs you a carriage just to travel between central London and the chapel outdoorsy area up here, so you want to be quite sure you're done before you leave, and maybe you visit some shitty locations just because you're being completionist. Even better, I'm falling over, in case 12, you have to get a train between locations in London and Carfax. The train takes a turn to get to its destination, and best of all, only the player who bids the most carriages actually gets to sit in first class and read the train card. Meanwhile, presumably everyone in second class is sitting, rocking in the train and wondering what's happening in the train that they don't know about because they're not in first class. So that's fun. But maybe what I love the most about Watson and Holmes is that it is a fascinating exercise in ignorance, right? So it shares 90% of its DNA with Sherlock Holmes Consultant Detective, with players choosing what locations to visit, sifting relevant details from streams of words as if they were panning for gold, thinking, and then that was meant to be a click. They got the solution. And yet the appeal is so different, right? Because in Consultant Detective, it's all about talking with your friends and thinking and working together. Work being the operative word, you know? This is an evening of hard work, and you crack it and you feel good and you kiss. But Watson and Holmes is about crushing silence and anxiety. From the moment you all pick up your first different location card, the fraction of a solution that you just collected feels destroyed by the weight of the knowledge that your friends have and you don't. And the pressure to go to 221 Baker Street as soon as you maybe think you have the answer is real, because you have no idea how close your friends are to a solution. And then someone will go early, and they'll knock on the door, and the whole table will fall silent as they cross-reference their answers with the answers to the game. And then they'll say, I was wrong. And it's as if you watch a driver accelerate into first place and then flip their car and go into a river and they're fine, they didn't die, it's fine. But even on a mundane level, in playing this game, you've all signed this social contract not to speak, or rather to only coyly allude to your experience. The absence of conversation running through this game feels like an electric current. Lots of board games say that you can't speak for a minute or 10 minutes. This game pretty much says you can't talk about what you're doing for an hour or 2 hours. We've talked before about the joy of board games where when you finish them you go, oh my god, I felt like this, and you talk about your experience, and then your friend tells you their experience. That's a wonderful moment. Watson and Holmes gives you that more than any other board game I've played. It takes that feeling and puts it in a brown paper package, ties it up with string, and gives it to you and says, you enjoy that, pal. And I mean, like, when you finish it, we had players, after they filed their answers, running out into the corridor to talk to each other as if they were desperate for a pee. Now, all this running around town mechanical stuff is arguably a smaller part of the game than the mysteries themselves, so I should review that. That's going to be difficult because of spoilers. I can say that I've played 3 of the cases in this game. I was happy with all of them. The writing's good, the thinking is good. Don't worry about that, and don't let that get in the way of you buying this game because of its concept. It backs it up. And what I do like is that the difficulty rating from 1 star to 3 star means you can provide a gentle game of Watson and Holmes or break your friends, which is lots of fun, and something that this game has in common with Witness. If you haven't watched our Witness review yet, please do. I love this game, think it's absolutely worth your time knowing it exists. It is Shut Up and Sit Down's 2 favourite things. It is fantastically clever and unbelievably dumb. You will be torturing yourself slightly when you watch this video because this game is currently out of print, but I would love, Istari, if you're watching this, please do another print run. I think you've got a winner on your hands with Witness. However, there is one problem with the deduction in this that I'm going to talk about now. So much of the joy in Watson and Holmes comes from guessing which locations are valuable and then outbidding your friends for them and then saying, oh, did you want to go and visit the bakery? Because I just heard they baked up a fresh batch of police. It's neat, but the key word there is guessing. And after you visited, say, the scene of the crime and a key witness, you can feel kind of at sea in a boat that is your brain, but with an outboard motor that is your gut. Definitely don't try and visualize that. So let's say you're looking for an accomplice and you visit like 3 locations in this metaphorical and literal game of find the lady, and your friend happens to go to one and finds them, and then they win, which is gonna happen. And like, that's not gonna feel the best necessarily. The game is still designed cleverly so I could like visit this 66% of locations and you could visit this 66%, and we could still both solve the case usually, which is cool. But still, there are going to be cases where you're not going to feel bitter that someone won and you didn't because they went to luckier cards. But the game still denies them that Sherlock opportunity that you want, where they sit back in their chair and go, of course it was elementary. Because then if you're like me, you're going to go, it's elementary, you're a dick. You know, I'm not proud of who I am. I definitely don't want to overstate that last point, though. I really don't think it's a problem. Like, since the original Sherlock Holmes novels, the appeal of mysteries and whodunits initially is that it's a puzzle that you're going to crack. But that cracking it is like 5% of the experience, or 0% if you're watching a TV whodunit. The remaining 95% is just it being wrapped up in it, in feeling that the answer's just around the corner. That's the real craft of these things, in getting clues and thinking how they jigsaw into the bigger problem and never giving up and always being on the edge of your seat. And Watson and Holmes has that in spades. Every time I sat down to play it, like I say, initially I was excited because I was going to crack it and I was going to go into my mind palace like in the BBC Sherlock series, even though every time I actually sat down to play it, my mind palace went like this.
All right, Quince, it must have been the butler, but what was his motive? Let's do this.
That's not a bit, you know, I really am absolutely terrible at these games. Recently I've been trying to feel more like Sherlock Holmes by getting into tea, which is actually cheaper than you might think and lots of fun. So, if you're still not convinced by this review, there are additional fun things in this box that I have to tell you about. Everybody gets character cards, including Irene Adler, whose ability is that once per game, you can take everyone's pencils for an entire round and no one can make any notes. That is classic, playful gamer design like Mama used to make. There's also, like in terms of tactics, 2 cards I haven't mentioned yet. Once a player's been eliminated, then the Sherlock Holmes cards get unlocked. You can pay 4 carriages to look at someone's answers that they scribbled down, or check one of your answers with an eliminated player. And then there's Watson. Anyone can pay 3 carriages with Watson and then pick a character who's gone to a location, and then that character, instead of secretly learning that location, has to read it out to the table, which I wasn't sold on as a game mechanic until I realised there's nothing in the manual that forces them to read it twice or says how quickly they have to read it. So if you do get Watson, you at least get the fun thing of reading at a steady clip through the location and all your friends panically making notes and potentially forcing them into a difficult decision because did they miss a detail? And if so, are they going to go back to the location that they already heard once? That is lots of fun. There's no mid-review turnaround coming. This is just a fantastic idea for a game, executed with generosity and attention to detail and love. It's a lovely box. If, however, you want a real mystery, the question is whether you should get Watson and Holmes or Sherlock Holmes, Consultant Detective, Jack the Ripper, and West End Adventures. What an awful name that is. I've only played 1 case in this and it was fine, so I don't fully feel confident in reviewing it. But here's what I'll add. Adler, Irene Adler. That's not a joke, that's just a name. Sherlock Holmes Consultant Detective is probably best with 2 or 3 players, or 1, and it takes an entire evening, whereas Watson and Holmes shines the more players you add, getting closer and closer to its cap value of 7 players, and takes just 1 or 2 hours. I'm just going to give you one more clue, which is that these games are the same dimensions and they look really good on a shelf together. So maybe you can solve that mystery. Bye.